Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Didati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanbitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Dhapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare So we are in Canto 3, Chapter 1, Text 41. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. So we're almost finished with this chapter, ready to start Chapter 2. We've got about 4 verses left. I don't know how many of them have actual purports. Somyanushoche tamada patantam Somyanushoche tamada patantam Bratre paretaya vidudureya Bratre paretaya vidudruheya Niryapito yena suhrit svapurya Niryapito yena suhrit svapurya Aham svaputran samanuvratena Aham swaputran samanuvratena Samyanushoche tamadapatantam Bharatre paretaya vidudruheya Niryapito yena suhrit sapurya Aham svaputran samanuvratena. Somyanushoche tamadhapatantam. Bratre paretaya vidudruheya. Niryapito yena suhrit sapurya. Aham svaputran samanuvratena. Samyo shoche tamada patantam. Bratre paretaya vidudruheya. Niryapito yena suhrit sapurya. Aham saputran samanuvratena. Saumyanushoche tamadhapatantam. Bratre paretaya vidudruheya. Niryapito yena suhrit svapurya. Aham saputran samanuvratena. Saumyanushoche tamadhapatantam. Bratre paretaya vidudruheya. Niryapito yena suhrit svapurya. Aham saputram samanuvratena. Ladies? Saumyanusoche tamadhapatantam. Bratre paretaya vidudruheya. Niryapito yena suhrit sapurya. Aham saputran samanuvratena. Anyone else? Somyanusoche tamadhapatantam. Bratre paretaya vidudruheya. Niryapito yena suhrit sapurya. Aham saputran samanuvratena. Somyam. Oh, gentle one. Anushoche. Just lamenting. Tam. Him. Adapatantam. Gliding down. Bratre. On his brothers. Paretaya. Death. Vidudruhe. Revolted against. Yaham. One who. Niryapita. Driven out. Yena. By whom? Suhrit. Well-wisher. Swapuryam. From his own house. Aham. Myself. Saputran. With his own sons. Samanuvratena. Accepting the same line of action. So we have the translation reading. O gentle one, I simply lament for he, Dhritarashtra, who rebelled against his brother after death. By him I was driven out of my own house, although I am a sincere well-wisher, because he accepted the line of action adopted by his own sons. So I say, and you please repeat, O gentle one, I simply lament for he, Dhritarashtra, who rebelled against his brother after death. By him I was driven out of my own house, although I am his sincere well-wisher, because he adopted the line of action adopted by his own sons. So the purport, Vidura did not ask about the welfare of his elder brother because there was no chance of his well-being. Only news of his gliding down to hell. Vidura was a sincere well-wisher for Dhritarashtra, and he had thought of him in the corner of his heart. He lamented that Dhritarashtra could rebel against the sons of his dead brother Pandu, and that he could drive him, Vidura, out of his own house on the dictation of his crooked sons. In spite of these actions, Vidura never became an enemy of Dhritarashtra, but continued to be his well-wisher. And at the last stage of Dhritarashtra's life, it was Vidura only who proved to be his real friend. Such is the behavior of Vaishnavas like Vidura. He desires all good, even for his enemies. Somyanu shoche tamadha patantam bratre paretaya vidu druheya niryapito yena suhritsvapurya aham svaputran samanuvratenam. O gentle one, I simply lament. O gentle one, I simply lament for he, Dhritarashtra, who rebelled against his brother after death. By him I was driven out of my own house, although I am his sincere well-wisher, because he accepted the line of action adopted by his own sons. We know from the story that Vidura left the palace at Hastinapur when he was insulted by Duryodhana. Vidura had been trying to counsel Dhritarashtra to do the right thing, and Dhritarashtra was unable to appreciate what Vidura was trying to say. And it happened to be that Duryodhana was in earshot, so Duryodhana took the opportunity to insult Vidura and suggested that he be cast out of the palace, only left with his breath. And Vidura thought, okay, looks like time for me to go. And he left. So Vidura was only trying to preach to Dhritarashtra, but this happened to him. This, I think, is one of those classic examples of that principle that we hear about so often: no good deed ever goes unpunished. Here it was that Vidura was trying to do good to Dhritarashtra, and instead he gets insulted, and uses it as an opportunity or a cue to leave and go on pilgrimage, which he does for many years. And he is completely out of the communication of the events going on.
With the microphone.
Yeah, the microphone's pretty close, but maybe they could, do the fader a bit higher if they wanted to. Okay, now I am booming. Okay, so the issue, of course, is that whenever we try to do good to other people, expect this. The principle of no good deed ever goes unpunished is not thinly spread. It is quite common to encounter. And I always think of the most humorous episode where the Pandavas have just been, kicked out of their rightful kingdom as a result of the gambling match, and they are proceeding into the forest, and Draupadi says to Yudhisthira, she says, "My dear husband, look at you. You are the emblem of all religious activity. You never do anything even slightly against dharma. And yet, here you are, here we are, sleeping on the cold earth, while Duryodhana eats sumptuous food and sleeps on a grand bedstead in the palace at Hastinapur. You, my dear husband, are living proof that karma doesn't work." And Yudhisthira replies to that, "My dear wife, you are speaking like an atheist." What's that? Speaking like an atheist. But of course, she said, "Just forgive me, my dear husband. I am so frustrated by these turn of events that I'm having a lot of difficulty containing myself." So she, kind of mollifies it a little bit there, but mollifies Yudhisthira. But at any rate, we can see this kind of thing happen. Why the Pandavas got so much dumped on them. They were only trying to do the right thing. And this is common, especially when you're out on Sankirtan. It's not so rare an instance that you do Sankirtan and somebody curses you or tries to get you thrown out of some place, or you try to give someone a book and they do something drastic or obnoxious. And this happens commonly. And in one sense, this is part of what I call Karma 201. Karma 101 is what we all know, that if you perform papa, or sinful action, you will get negative consequences in the future. This is vikarma. If you perform punya, which is good actions, in the future you will get good karma, or what is usually just called karma. But if you perform devotional service, you get neither good nor bad karma, which is called akarma. So this is the basic equation. But when analyzing what's going on in the Mahabharata or in Krishna's pastimes, we see that often it doesn't flow. And this is kind of what Draupadi is, pointing at. This, what appears to be a travesty of what is normal karma. We have again the same kind of episode when Yudhisthira finally reaches the heavenly planets. And the first thing he sees is Duryodhana being worshipped on a golden throne in the heavenly planets. And Yudhisthira doesn't feel so good about this. Yudhisthira, despite his being so magnanimous and despite his being so, kind of outgoing and ready to appreciate anything, he's kind of revolted by this idea that here, after he gets to heaven, he sees Duryodhana being worshipped on a golden throne. And of course, he's taken aside by Indra, who says, "My dear Yudhisthira, this is heaven. Yudhisthira died on battle facing the enemy, so he's got the right to be here in heaven, you know." And Yudhisthira said, "But, you know, this one man was the one that led to the exhaustion of the lives of countless kshatriyas. Just, I can't watch this anymore." This is what Yudhisthira is saying. "Rather, please take me to where my brother and my wife are." So Indra says, "All right," and they summon a messenger. And the messenger comes, and Yudhisthira is walking with the messenger, and he notices that they're kind of walking out of, you know, the area that they've been at where Duryodhana is being worshipped. And it gets darker, and he notices that there's less foliage, and he starts noticing strange smells in the air. And then he begins to hear, you know, kind of cries of distress. And he's asking the attendant, you know, "Where are you taking me?" And the attendant says, "You wanted to be where your brothers and your wife are." And so he, "So longer, we are suffering so much. We have just experienced a drop of relief from our suffering just by seeing you." And Yudhisthira hears these disembodied voices, and he says, "Who's speaking?" And he says, I am Arjuna, your brother." And he hears another voice, "I am Bhimsena, your brother." And Draupadi says, "Please just stay here a little more, stay a little longer. We feel a relief just by being in your presence." And then Yudhisthira says, "Everything I've been taught my whole life is wrong. How is it that how is it that Duryodhana is being worshipped on a golden throne? It appears my brothers and wife are in hell. How is this possible?" And, you know, then when he says that, the messenger, I think, becomes, you know, Indra, and everything changes around. And, you know, he's informed that everyone who is a king or a ruler or involved in, you know, political activity has to at least see hell. And so they're brought out of there. And of course the Pandavas eventually, they're only stopping over in the heavenly planets for a short time before they go back to the spiritual world. But again, we have this, what appears to be a reversal of everything that we have ever seen. And I think this confuses devotees oftentimes. So there's a second level, which I call Karma 201. So Karma 101 is the basic thing. You do sinful action. You get bad reactions, vikarma. You do pious activity, you get good reaction. You do akarma, you get devotional service. Now 201 is what happens with devotees, where some of the time, because devotees are supposed to be engaged in the evangelical activity of bringing people out of the material world. That's what that's our duty to perform. And it's a thankless task, and it's a difficult task for many reasons. And oftentimes, just as the spiritual master takes on the karma of the disciple when he gives initiation, to some extent, the devotees too are taking on the sinful karma of the people they are trying to deliver. Just the act of trying to deliver others puts us in situations where we are put upon by society, by the government, by the weather, by our own bodies. You know, it's not at all difficult or unusual, that when you experience the process of trying to deliver others through book distribution, through Harinam or whatever, all sorts of adversity comes upon you. Just as it did the Pandavas. You know, they weren't really experiencing the negativity of their own sinful reactions. They were experiencing, to some extent, the negativity of others, the sinful activity of others being visited upon them because of their effort to deliver the fallen. So this is something that is part of the spiritual process. We are in the effort of trying to deliver others, and you know, those of us who have been preaching for some time, it's not unusual sometimes to try to preach to somebody and have them turn around and do some weird thing, you know. And you almost wish that you had never started speaking to them. And sometimes this might cause you grief or embarrassment or who knows what. Lots of things can happen. And this is just part of the game, you know. We see this, you know, with Jesus Christ. We see this with Prabhupada. You know, Prabhupada tried to deliver so many people, some of whom turned against him, and some of whom took initiation and then promptly stopped following any kind of regulation of any kind. All these things are an embarrassment and a source of grief for the spiritual master. And these are not unusual. These are not extraordinary things. These are kind of Derigor. These are the par for the course kind of thing. So just don't be surprised. It's just the way things work. And this is part of what I call Karma 201, why it is that people who are trying to do the right thing sometimes find themselves in difficulty, not necessarily for something they've done. Of course, in general, part I think of Karma 201 is the fact that in the material world, everybody gets dumped on it. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a saint or you're a sinner, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're young or old, whether you're innocent or guilty, whether you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing, whether you wish well for everyone or you hate everybody, you're still going to get dumped on because material nature plays no favorites, you know, and it's part of the continuing gentle and sweet reminder that, hey, we don't belong here. And this is how the Supreme Lord helps us to remember this important fact, that whatever it is, we don't belong here, and we should try to get out. There's also Karma 301, which I sometimes talk about too, which is the fact that Krishna has his own interesting way of writing things which may or may not follow any of the usual karmic formulas, you know. So sometimes somebody does something insignificant and gets a huge reaction, like Cricket, you know, putting the snake around the sage's shoulders and getting cursed to die. And sometimes people do drastically horrible things and get a good reaction, you know, like Jai and Vijay, who did so many things and eventually just got the mercy of Nityananda, you know. So Krishna does things in ways that, you know, he makes the rules, he breaks the rules. Who are we to tell him he can't, you know? So it's just the way it works, you know. He makes the rules, he breaks the rules. But he has reasons why he breaks his own rules. And so this is why sometimes karma is a confusing thing, this overlay of Karma 101, Karma 201, and Karma 301. There's more to it than that, but I don't want to make this whole class about that. But what's interesting is this idea of desiring good, even for one's enemies, which I think everyone needs to practice. In 7th Canto, Prahlad says, Jahi asuram babamamam tvamatmana sama mano datsvana shantim vidvisha rite chitad atmana utpatesti tat tadihi anantasya mahat samarhanam. And that verse is always stuck in my mind, you know. It's a verse that, as far as I know, hardly anyone ever quotes. I don't know if Prabhupada ever quoted this verse. It's 7.8.9, so it's easy to remember like that, 7, 8, 9. Jahi asuram bhavamamam tvamatmana samamano dasvana shanti vidvisa rite jitadatmana upatesti tadihiyan tasya mahat samarhanam. This is Prahlad speaking to his demoniac father, Hiranyakashipu. And Prahlad is saying, my dear father, just put aside this idea of friends and enemies. Except for the uncontrolled mind, there is no enemy in this world. Rather, make your heart equal to everyone. And someone in this attitude has perfectly worshiped the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So just make your mind equal to everyone. So this is, I think, a very important thing. And of course, Prahlad is making the important point that except for our own mind, there is no enemy in this world. If we can conquer our own mind, it's smooth sailing from there on out, you know. And this is what's the difference between spiritual life and material life, that really we have with us our own worst enemy. And if we can, through devotional service, gradually beat that enemy down, like Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati used to say, beat the mind, you know, when you get up 100 times with a broomstick, and then at night you beat the mind 100 times with a shoe. So what does this mean, actually? It means that we usually are beating the mind with the process of chanting the holy name. We are beginning to try to transcend the mind, our conditioned, programmed mind. Our mind has patterns, and those patterns are very, very deeply etched. And by the process of chanting Hare Krishna, we are gradually erasing those patterns. Yes, they can change. They do change. I'm telling you, in my own life, they did change. You know, this is not something that I'm talking about just theoretically, that I experienced through my years of chanting that the fabric, or the, whatever you want to call it, the consistency of my mental consciousness has drastically undergone an incredible revolution in the time. It did not happen fast, but it did happen. Certainly things are not perfect or anything even remotely close to it, but compared to the position that I had when I first came into Krishna consciousness, things are way, way different, you know. And this is the nature of the purifying process of chanting the holy name. And then you can actually wish good for everyone, as Prahlad wishes good for everyone, you know. There's another really nice verse, and it's also coming from Prahlad, but it's in 5th canto. And what is it? 5:18:9. And this is the residents of Jambudweep offering prayers. You know, this is 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Swasti astu vishvasya kala prasidatam dhyayantu bhutani shivam mitodya manascha bhadram bhajatad dadhoksaje avesyatam mo matir appahoituki. May there be all good fortune throughout the universe. May all envious persons be pacified. May all living entities become calm by practicing bhakti yoga. For by accepting devotional service, they will think of each other's welfare. Therefore, let us all engage in the service of the Supreme Transcendent, Lord Sri Krishna, and always remain absorbed in thought of him. This is also actually said by Prahlad. May there be all good fortune throughout the universe. May all envious persons be pacified. May all living entities become calm by practicing bhakti yoga. For by accepting devotional service, they will think of each other's welfare. Therefore, let us all engage in the service of the Supreme Transcendence, Lord Sri Krishna, and always remain absorbed in thought of him. So, svasti, we hear this is common word in various yajnas, svasti, let all auspiciousness. Kala, in this verse, swasti astu vishvasya kala prasidatam. Kala is envious persons. Prasidatam, be pacified. So let them be pacified. And in the purport there, Prabhupada explains that there are two kinds of envious beings. One is a snake or a sarpa, and the other is an envious human being. And Prabhupada tells us, of the two, the snake can be pacified, but not the human being. So sometimes the snake can, as Prabhupada says, be pacified by mantras and certain herbs. And in India, they know these techniques for how to work with snakes. But a human being who is envious, like of course Hiranyakashipu was, such a person cannot be pacified. So Duryodhana could not be pacified because he was envious. And because Dhritarashtra was connected with his son, he could not give up this affinity for his son. As a result, he became implicated and culpable along with his son, because his son had many diabolical plans to destroy the Pandavas. He wanted to murder them all. So this meant that this was shared by his father. And so this is why Vidura did not inquire really about Duryodhana. And it mentions in this verse that we're looking at today that he didn't really that much inquire about Dhritarashtra, because he knew that